Good evening, and thanks for joining me on Wednesday night, and happy Valentine's Day. I will go ahead and open with the Lord's Prayer in the Aramaic tongue, and then we'll continue from where we left off last week. أعوند وشميا نتقداش شماخ تأثي ملكوتاخ نهوي صويانخ إكند وشميا أبر حولان لحمات سنكانا يومنا واشوقلان حوبين إكند أبحنان شوقن لحيوين لا تعلن لنسيونا إلا قصا من بيشة مثول دي لاخي ملكوثة حي لو تشبحتا بعالم عالمين Amen. Well, before I get going, Dr. Erico, for those of you who are studying the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic with him, he did not do he canceled today's session, and he should be doing the session next Wednesday. If you're new to the group and you're wondering what I'm talking about, Dr. Erico is going almost verse by verse, working with a small group of attendees, students, to learn how to speak the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, the prayer I just did to open the session. I'm not sure if he has any more availability, but if you're interested in that, please reach out to the foundation, and Lynn should be able to help you with that. And he might be doing the session next Wednesday. We're still kind of debating whether I'm going to do it or he will. So it's going to be a surprise for us and you probably Wednesday. So with that said, I want to go back to the topic I started last week, which is I gave it my own title is Jesus's teachings about freedom. No loyalties, no borders. And that's really core. When Jesus started his ministry, he declared one thing. He did not open up his ministry with, I'm going to die for you on the cross, and I'm going to take all your sins away. He did not start by saying, here are the things that you would have to do: get circumcised, get baptized, get this, get that, and that's how you'll belong to my religion. He did not think of religion. He came from a Jewish family, but he observed what was limiting the Jewish faith. The faith of Abraham and Moses and David and Solomon, and he saw the blessing when Abraham started the movement of this new way of viewing gods, and God specifically, the God of Abraham. Abraham came from a pagan background. He had other gods that his family had, and when he started reflecting and communing and communicating with this new universal presence, the Ithya Rabba, the Allah, he found a connection, a soul connection that resonated with him, that was way more powerful than the gods that they were carrying with them as they traveled from Babylon to the land of Canaan. And when God gave him Isaac, the idea was that now that you get me. This is God talking to Abraham. Now that you get me, now that you understand what my presence is all about, I am going to give you offsprings. And I'm not going to get into the Ishmael-Isaac debate, but whether it's through Isaac or through Ishmael, or to be honest, I think it's through both, we received this message today that's about enlightenment. It's about freeing the world from a lot of what ails it. So the descendants of Abraham were supposed to take this lovely understanding of the one Allah and share it with the world and bless the world that way. Now you fast forward to the time of Jesus, and what has happened, that message got locked in and became not only a defining characteristic of what we call the Jewish people, the descendants of Isaac and Jacob, and the kingdom of Moses and kingdom of David, and all the stuff that we read in what we call the Hebrew Bible or the Old Testament. But it got locked in, and it became even a burden on its own people. So by the time Jesus came, he's going like, what? But by the time he declared his ministry, he said, no, 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 we need to go back. And he started preaching that the kingdom of God, God's sovereign presence, the only true way of living is at hand. The old age has ended. That was his opening speech. That's what when he sent his shliches, his apostles, the sent ones, he didn't tell them to go talk about his blood or about the commandments or about this or that. He said, go let everybody know that the time of God is here. The presence of God is here amongst us. We need to recognize it, and we need to live by God's rules, not by man's rule. So that's the shaking point that Jesus felt, the energy and the desire to go out and give up his life, risk his life. He wasn't hoping to give up his life, but he was willing to risk his life to bring back both the Jewish people and what was meant to be all the nations to recognize this God presence, this lovely, lovely God. And he did not spend a lot of time, he didn't spend any time making people fear God. He spent time making people love God and demonstrate that love of God, not by just going and sitting on top of a mountain and saying, God, I love you, God, I love you, God, I love you. He sent them and said he wanted us to demonstrate that by loving one another. That was the definition of a follower of Jesus. They had no badges, they had no ID cards, they had no membership cards. He said, they will know you by the way you love one another. So that's the defining thing about Jesus's ministry. Now, how did he do that? He knew that he's going to be chipping. He had this jewel, and he was going to chip at all the stuff that has grown on top of it and hid it away from our eyes, from our lives. It became so separated, and we are today. I just got a question for Dr. Erico on YouTube about how do we get this and then try to apply it to today's world. Today's world is difficult. I wished you a happy Valentine's Day, which is supposed to be the day for love. It's also a commercial holiday, and we're all supposed to go out for dinner and buy gifts and get flowers and so forth. But if you just take it as a day for love, and why do we only have one day for love? Why isn't every day for love? That's Jesus. He said, every day live and love and live your life to its fullest and love everybody, including your enemies. He did not draw any lines on love. We have an amazing capacity to love. And if any of you have practiced that, or if you don't, give it a shot for a week. Go and try to love every person you interact with. Come at them from a place of love. Think, I'm going to be talking to my bank today, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to love that person who's going to greet me at the bank and who's going to sit across from me. I'm going to love the tax collector. I'm going to love the grocery person I'm going to interact with. And you'll notice that you can probably you might get exhausted because it's tremendous energy, but you'll feel really good. It's good exhaustion because you will be able to love each one of those people. Now, what we do today is we try to kind of limit the circle of love to the people we trust, the people we know, and so forth. And it becomes hard. Jesus was saying, trust me, break that. love everybody, it's going to work for you. But back to my metaphor, he had this jewel, but he also knew that there is a lot of rust and dust and made up stuff that was covering it. So yes, you became, in his religion, you became Jewish, but being a Jewish at the time of Jesus was painful. It's a painful existence. You had the scribes, you had the Sadducees, you had the Pharisees, you had the temple people, you had the rabbis, you had all these different authorities, and you're under occupation. You're under Roman occupation. So you had to also work with all this authority that was collecting taxes from you, hiring tax collectors to break your arm and your leg if you didn't pay on time, and take stuff out of your home. And the laws were now went from love and creating a lovely community and becoming the light of the world, to a community that's in constant struggle with one another. They were not following the teachings of the Torah about even divorce and giving the women their paperwork so they could go reestablish themselves in society. A divorced woman in the Jewish culture and the Jewish tradition and religion has all the rights to be. She's free. She's free to date. She's free to remarry. She's free to stay single. She is free to use the community pool to cleanse herself. She had all these rights if she had her paperwork. What they did then, and at the time of Jesus, is they threw them out. Some men threw their wives out when they couldn't give them children, or they married a younger one, or they couldn't afford having the wife. They just threw them out to the street. What would a woman do and year 1 AD in the streets of Jerusalem or Galilee and Nazareth and so forth? They had no way of supporting themselves. They could go back to their family, but sometimes their families were poor. They couldn't do that. Jesus saw that. And he said, you're doing the wrong thing. You're not following what even your own law says you need to do. And one of the questions I received last week that I didn't get to cover is, what's the difference between commandment and law? And commandments is a specific list that Moses came up with. And the law is the rest of the writings that were also in the Torah, and then the prophets kind of added. But the prophets didn't really create a lot. They were like Jesus, trying to bring the Jewish people back to what made them special, what made them good, and to try to take away some of the pomp and circumstance that was added to the religion and separation with God and so forth. The prophets were really good at trying to pull back the people into spirituality. But their Achilles heel, the prophets versus Jesus, they had unquestioned loyalty to the Jewish tribes, to the Israelites, the 12 tribes of Israel. They put them above everybody. And that, I say that as a bad thing, but traditionally we all grew up with it as a good thing, to have loyalty to your nation, to have loyalty to your town, to have loyalty to your family. That's why I said this is like the Jesus freedom from any type of loyalties, and the only loyalty is to love and to Allah and to the methods of Allah and the teachings of Jesus, which got us closer to God. That's what Jesus didn't want any credit for his teachings. He didn't say, worship me. Look at me, look at what I can do. He was a true teacher. He was constantly trying to show us the ways to get closer to our full potential, to get us closer to being fully loving, fully capable of removing any type of barriers and borders. So now I'm gonna to chip at that. Last time I spoke about a few items. So if you weren't with us last time, go back and listen to the YouTube video. I think I made it public, so anybody could access it. I talked about political kingdoms. I talked about Jesus's willingness and affiliation with the marginal people in his community. He did not view them. We call them marginal people. He just saw them as people who needed the healing. They needed the love. They were the outcasts. He brought them back in. He sat and ate with them. He didn't just talk about, watch the poor people, watch the harlots, watch the tax collectors. He actually went and grabbed food with them, which is the most intimate thing you could do with people, is to share a meal. And to share a meal in the Near East in the time of Jesus is not let's go to a nice restaurant and sit across from each other, and each person orders their plate. To share a meal in the Near East, just like it was in the Last Supper, it's a big plate in the middle of the table, and people are dipping with their hands, or maybe if they have the thin bread, they would use it to collect the food. And they would, if they got a really nice piece, they put it in your mouth. They don't put it in their mouth. And we see that in the Last Supper, but that's how Jesus. So imagine this rabbi sitting with a harlot on one side, with a tax collector on the other side, and feeding them and eating from them, and letting the harlot go and wash his feet to honor him. And that's Jesus in action. He's not a dude wearing a white robe floating around Galilee. He's a guy who's actually living his teachings. So now we see him. So I talked about the political kingdoms and political alliances. He didn't want that. He wanted to affiliate with everybody, especially the marginalized people in his community, which is something that we should always be aware of. And we have a lot of opportunities these days of dealing with people who are who don't have a home to live in, or who are in need, or who are struggling. And those are the people that need our love and our attention. And then he went into the Sabbath. He tackled the Sabbath because at his time, again, it was a big burden to deal with all the rules that were applied to the Sabbath. I went back and I looked. It's in the Ten Commandments. Observe the Sabbath, take a day off, and dedicate that day to your holy work. Even Moses had the concept of a day for reflection and a day for holiness. By the time Jesus came, and which was 2,500, 3,000 years after Moses came up with the commandments, it's already taken a totally different definition. It became a burden. I couldn't light a candle. I couldn't walk from here to there. I couldn't help somebody. They even frowned upon healing. If you healed somebody on the Sabbath, they accused you of breaking the Sabbath rules. So Jesus was now starting to chip at all the stuff that was built on this jewel, which is our relationship with Allah, and to bring that presence back, to make it something of a daily practice in our lives. It's with every breath. Once you connect with this stuff, once you start practicing loving everybody you run into, it becomes nature for you. It becomes, because we have it. When we're children, we have a lot of it. But as we grow up, we start getting programmed about color, about social place, about clean and unclean, about good habits and bad habits. And we start judging based on that. So jumping in right where I wanted to start today, which is I'm starting 20 minutes in. But in chapter 7 of Mark, we run into a whole encounter with Jesus. And I might have to read most of it. But then there gathered to him Pharisees and scribes who had come from Jerusalem. So these are the Jerusalem is the center of Judaism at the time of Jesus, because the temple was there. And they looked at Nazareth and Galilee as a lesser form of Judaism, lesser people because they were mixed races. The population was not as pure as the one you could find in Jerusalem. That the Jews of Jerusalem were more of the tribe of Judah, and the ones in the north were more of the 10 tribes that had separated and got into captivity and came back. But by then they were not as pure as the ones in Jerusalem. So that's key, that they came from Jerusalem. And they saw some of his disciples eating bread with their hands unwashed, and they reproached him. So I don't want to bore you with this. Okay, it says here, because they strictly observe the tradition of the elders. Okay, so now they develop a tradition. Great habit for us. I'm not telling you don't wash your hands, but don't make rules and laws about it. And that's what was happening. So they attacked the disciples, his students, because they're not washing their hands. And he used that moment to actually come back at them. And so even the things from the market, if they were not washed, they would not eat. So they developed all these rules. And I just came back from the Near East, and it's very hard to break the love that sometimes you experience. I can't tell you how many times I went to the market, and the person who's selling me the stuff would try to sell me an orange by peeling it right there in front of me and handing me a piece to put in my mouth. And when you're faced with that, and this is what Jesus knew about the culture, you're supposed to grab it and put it in your mouth. You're not supposed to say, well, you didn't wash your hands, you didn't wash the orange. I need to go wash my hands to catch the food because I just was driving and I was, God knows where, shopping for something else, and I touched a whole bunch of things. And I've seen Westerners, when they go there, it's a freakish experience, because like, what do I do now? And the same thing when you go to somebody's home, they'll grab something and they'll go like this, and it's supposed to go straight into your mouth. So Jesus knew the culture, and that's a very loving gesture in the culture. But now we made rules around it. We don't wash, we don't do, and they affiliated it with religion. So now they made it a sin. It's something that defiles you. It's something that's awful, that you lose. Basically, you're losing your religion when you participate in that. Cups and pots and so forth. Read chapter 7. It's like it goes into a lot of details. But he said to them, the prophet Isaiah well prophesied about you, O hypocrites, as it is written, this people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far away from me. And they worship me in vain when they teach the doctrines of the commandments of men, for you have ignored the commandments of God, and you observe the tradition of men, such as the washing of cups and pots, and a great many other things like these. He said to them, you certainly do injustice to the commandment of God, so as to sustain your own tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and he who curses father or mother, let him be put to death. But you say, a man may say to his father or his mother, what is left over is korban, which is offering, and yet you do not let him do anything for his father or mother. So you dishonor the word of God for the sake of the tradition which you have established, and you do a great many other things like these. So, and it goes on. So he uses that, and he then tells them, what defiles a man is what goes into him. What defiles a man is what comes out of him. So he is now almost attacking the scribes and Pharisees by telling them, it's like your approach, what you're questioning is what defiles you. It's not the food that you put in. And even his disciples were baffled by his response to them, because they're used to this tradition. They grew up in homes where they had to wash the pots and pans and wash their hands and wash the food and before they consumed it. And I know if you're thinking about today and the microbes that we have and so forth, I'm not trying to tell you, lose your good hygiene habits. Especially with the pandemic we just had a few years ago. Keep your good habits, but don't make them law. Don't make them tradition. Don't judge other people, because some of them they can't, or they come from cultures that don't respect that. Honor that. and figure out a way to work with it and be kind when you do reject it. But they were judging. So tradition. I also talked last time about family. So I'm not going to go back into family, because here is where Jesus, when I spoke about how Jesus wanted to break up the loyalty to the family and replace it by love for all. Okay, so we are, we don't like to think of it that way, but we accidentally fell into, we know how creation happens now, and we know that it's, millions of opportunities happen at that moment, and one matches, and we work out, and we become the person we are, and we happen to be born in that family. Most of us, I know some are adopted, some have different circumstances, but the majority of people have that traditional structure. And yet, we become loyal to that. We are taught that loyalty. We get the name immediately from the father, or from the nowadays father and mother and so forth. And we're told the important, and the tradition and the history and the family tree and so forth. So that loyalty then starts trumping our loyalty to love, our loyalty to the kingdom of Allah. And so Jesus was breaking that. Now, last week I had people ask me a few questions. It's probably, I'll just answer them in the session. In Exodus, the fifth commandment says to honor your mother and father. How does this relate to what Jesus is teaching? So I just read you a part of why Jesus was breaking the family is not to dishonor the father and mother, but he was watching how people were using the commandments in one way and not in other ways. And so they've defined ways to work around it. So in what I just read, the child is not giving the parents food, because he's saying the highest priority, what I'm told, what I'm taught, is to give that the korban, which is the offering in the temple. So he's, instead of supporting his parents, he's putting the temple ahead of them. Okay, that's why I said, when Jesus was asked, when the guy asked him, well, can I follow you? And he told them, or what do I need to do to belong to this movement? He said, drop everything and join me, come with me. He said, no, I have to bury my father. So, and that, because that's the tradition, take care of your parents until they die. And so he wasn't telling him, your father is not important. You're saying you need to switch your priorities and care about this more than anything, and by default you become better with your parents. So that's why even here he's arguing with them, and you get a glimpse into what Jesus was doing. He wasn't disobeying the commandments. He was actually bringing them back to what they're supposed to be, which is love your parents, take care of your parents, be good to them. And sometimes it is hard, because sometimes parents are not at their best when they are parenting you. So as you become an adult, you have that memory of it could be any bunch of different things that we carry with us, and that can create a lot of tension between parents and their children. So what Moses was trying to do is stay good and honor them. And then things got really complicated, as they are today with us. So it is hard. And I know that one of the other questions is about Jesus using the term father. And some churches go into father, mother now, which was not mentioned in the Bible, and Jesus did not mention it. But they're evolving the teaching, which is our beloved people, because some people have a struggle with male, and some people are specifically don't like their dads. So now we are putting our problems on the teaching of Jesus. What we need to do is understand where he was coming from 2,000 years ago, the cultural definition, his own relationship with his own father, and why that was so strong in his early life, that when he tried to describe this God that he was promoting his kingdom, He took from what Joseph was doing with him when he was growing up. So a lot of his example, he says, when you ask your father for bread, he will not hand you a stone, or he will not hand you a snake. And meaning that the father, the parent that he experienced, and that's how he viewed God, is he gives us everything we need, and he never gives us something that would harm us. So he translated that because of the culture to the Father, plus his relationship with God, as I'm bringing you back to his ways because I really understand his ways. I studied the prophets, I studied the Torah, I looked at the state of our society, and now I feel I can give you that message. This is the message of Jesus that powered the first 300 plus years of Christianity, or of the early movement, before it started kind of going, becoming a religion and becoming a state religion and so forth. That's what's important about Jesus, is he tried to do all, away with a lot of the bad that was added to the Jewish religion, remind the people that we need to open up. So along those lines, that the next part of Jesus's ministry, as he continues, we're still in chapter 7 of the Gospel of Mark. And I'm not doing, if you weren't with me last week, I'm just using the Gospel of Mark, but I'm bouncing around, and there are examples from the different Gospels. I usually use the Gospel of Matthew, so I thought that would be fun to just go to Mark. It has almost the same things. So in Mark, how are we doing on time? Okay, I probably will do this part. Yeah, this is a major part. So in Mark verse 25, 7:25 through 29. For immediately a woman, so this is after Jesus does the whole washing and so forth. Go ahead and read it, because he talks about like the root cause of why he said that what comes out of the man's mouth is what defiles him, or what comes out of him, including thought. So he talks about that. But here he immediately, for immediately a woman heard about him, whose daughter had an unclean spirit. She had a psychological illness, and she came and fell at his feet. But the woman was a heathen. So now you got a rabbi and a heathen woman from Phoenicia in Syria. So a Syrian Phoenician woman. And she besought him to cast out the demon from her daughter. So she heard of him as a healer, as a loving man, as what he's preaching. And she came searching for him to help her with her daughter. And Jesus said to her, so now Jesus is in a tough position. He's a rabbi. He's told that you don't affiliate with the other races. Okay, so this is so important, because I'm going to go through 3 or 4 examples of Jesus dealing with other races. If you read the Torah, everything before Jesus, Abraham, when he left Babylon, he took a very hard, risky journey to go to the land of Canaan. He received a message, and he left his homeland and went to establish a new home for himself and his family. Now, his mannerism, his way of living, his respect for humanity allowed him to travel safely across all of these lands, and then was given land by the Canaanites to settle in. And then you look at how the rest of the history of the Israelites developed with their neighbors was in constant conflict. I can't say all the people, because I know that they intermarried with some tribes and so forth, but almost always the Jewish people struggled with their neighbors, and as tribes sometimes struggled with one another. So Jesus comes from a tradition of thousands of years of closing in and becoming tribal, and identifying with the religion and the circumcision. Everybody was circumcised. So that's how they knew one another. When you ran into somebody in the middle of nowhere and wanted to know if they're the same religion, that's what you watched for. That was their passport. Um, so they were closed in so much. So now with this episode, Jesus is interacting with, because in Galilee there were all these people. The Samaritans were right next door. The Romans were there occupying, and they had their officers and their people there, Roman citizens living in Nazareth and in Jerusalem and so forth. So you had all these different tribes around you, the Phoenicians, the Syrians, and the Arameans north of you. So all these people are there. And Jesus now can say, I'm going to just stay closed, or he's going to go back to the original message of Abraham and say, we are supposed to open up this and educate the people about the lovely kingdom of Allah, and spread that all across the world. So he's setting something here that's so important. Yet he goes in hesitantly because he has an audience, and the audience is going like, what is he going to do? Is a Jewish healer going to heal a Phoenician woman's daughter? So, and Jesus said to her, let the children be first filled. So he's talking about the Jewish people. For it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Think about it. That's a big insult. Now, love of a mother to her daughter. But she answered, saying to him, yes, my Lord, even the dogs eat the children's crumbs under the table. See, she tapped into something and gave him an out. Jesus said to her, go your way. Just because of this word, the demon has gone out of your daughter. So she went to her house and found her daughter lying in bed, and the demon gone out of her. So he took an opportunity, and I'm going to give you more verses. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. So in Matthew 5, chapter 8, 5 through 13. So I'm going to go back to Matthew and another episode. Yes. So chapter 8 and verses 5 through 13. When Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion approached him and appealed to him. So now you're dealing with a Roman centurion, saying, my Lord, my boy is lying in the house, paralyzed and suffering greatly. Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. So in Matthew's episode, he does not put a barrier. And then now the centurion answered, saying, my Lord, I am not good enough for you to enter under the shadow of my roof, but just say a word and my boy will be healed. So the centurion now had his barrier jump in. He needs the healing for his child, but he's afraid of what might happen if one of the Jewish subjects comes to his house and enters a Roman house. They didn't enter. So here's Jesus sitting as a child and maybe sitting with his dad and watching this take place. Here's an ill boy that could be healed by the medicine that the Jewish people had, or that the knowledge they had, but they let the kid die, and vice versa. So, there are things that the Romans could do to help the Jewish people. They wouldn't let them into their homes either. So that barrier is so embedded in our learning. That's why we have racism today. That's why we have war. That's why we have problems all over the world. Last night I watched a documentary that's nominated for an Oscar. I think it was on, I want to say Netflix, but I'm not positive. It might be on Hulu. Bobby Wine, President of the People. They did not get into tribalism, but we cause so much pain because of these alliances, because we buy into them, and we have an opportunity, but the tug of family, the tug of tribe, the tug of nation pulls on us so much, and we take it for granted. We don't question it. That causes us so much pain. And a lot of the corruption that we see is because when the wealth comes, when the assistance comes, we tend to just look right around us in our circle and keep that wealth within us. We don't spread the blessing and get more of it. And yet sometimes the givers, their intent is to go spread it everywhere. And some of them don't, because they want the benefits that they get from just aligning with the power that's controlling that area. That is something that we have to lose. And I'm happy to say that in my lifetime, I went from despair to some hope in regards to this specific situation. People are now preaching love. Figure out a way to solve your problems other than by war and by killing one another. We need to get there. Jesus has the keys, and we hopefully, the people who are listening to this, understand that we should be acting from that space. But if you know politicians, if you know people in power, if you know somebody who is working in a factory that's making bombs and making parts for war planes and war designs and so forth, reach out. We need to take those talents and put them into doing some other things. Let those industries starve. Let those businesses keep advertising for jobs and double and triple their salaries, because we shouldn't be building these things. We shouldn't be encouraging our children to go and become a cog in that machine. It's time to stop making weapons. It's time to stop killing one another. And I will end with that, because I'm so passionate about that. And Jesus healing the Phoenician's woman daughter, healing the centurion's daughter. We have the story about the good, what we call the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan man who did not look at any markers on the victim on the side of the road. The only thing he saw is a human being in need and bleeding. And he took compassion and he took love. And he cared for him better than most people care for their parents. He put him up, he carried him, he put him up. And the Levites, the religious people were like, I can't touch blood, I can't do this on this. I can. So Jesus saw that. And the story there is, open up to all the nations around you and love them all and treat them as your own. And we will lose the concept of being a foreigner. We will lose the concept of being the other. That's the power of Jesus's message. And with that, I'm going to stop today's session. I will. This is his ministry, so I suspect next time I talk, it will be about something around this, and hopefully your questions are in line with that. Okay, so I'll start with the questions online, and if I probably won't cover all of them. Plus, I have some from both Saturday's session and last week. To be fair, let me start with last week's sessions. I answered the first one about the fifth commandment. I read somewhere online that Jesus referred to father as dual gender. I answered that one. Thoughts on this? Mark is my favorite gospel because it really focuses on Jesus's ministry of healing and casting out demons. On that note, how do you say in Aramaic, come out of this man, you unclean spirit? I should have prepared that one. I'll share this one next time. Actually, I'll show you the Aramaic and I'll walk you through it. What is a physical Satan or just a thought? Was it a physical Satan or just a thought or a dream that tempted Jesus? I talked about when I spoke about the experience in the desert and how Satan offered Jesus the king to be the king of all the kingdoms of the world. Definitely, and again, last week I got into more details around the concept of Satan, Satana. And the physical and non-physical and so forth. But these were temptations. We have temptations. I talked about that. We have these thoughts that our brains pick up on, learn from just living and watching and interacting with people. And sometimes they are devilish thoughts. We call them devilish thoughts. that could lead us in the wrong direction. And Jesus was testing himself. But in his desert experience, those thoughts were more focused on his ministry. So he was asking himself, asking God to, he's listening and trying to figure out what his ministry was about. Definitely not physical. There wasn't a guy sitting next to him in the desert, all red and with horns and a fork and so forth. That's Dante developed that, not the Bible and not Jesus. But the idea of having those temptations was always there. And there are a lot of great Jewish writings about these temptations and how they play sometimes a positive role in our life. So, help us expand our thinking. So definitely not physical Satan. There is no physical Satan. And all of that is misinterpreted and misunderstood in the Bible. So Jesus was working with individual enlightenment and not with governments. That's true. What might be Jesus' approach to bring love to the present situation in the ongoing situation in Israel and Palestine? As I said before, that problem was not created by God or by Allah, but the teachings of Jesus on both sides. And it's sad because they're both in the Holy Land and where Jesus started his ministry, and the land where Abraham settled. By the way, Beersheba and all those places that we read in the Bible are very close to Gaza and very, very close to that coast. Some of these areas might have been walked by, I'm sure, by the apostles, and some of them have been walked on by Jesus. So we have these teachings, and as I said, I have hope because I'm seeing both sides starting to look at the people who are leading them into these catastrophes and asking them to stop. Now, we have other complexities that go with that specific situation that need to be resolved by looking at what's ahead of us, not how we got here. How we got here will teach us a lot of mistakes that both groups did. The problem started, you can almost take it back to Europe. And a lot of the people who are settled today there, if you look at statistics from the late 1800s, 1900s, came from Europe, escaping the same situation that started in their communities there. So the answer is again, it's love. It's looking at each other as fully human, and that's what the teachings today have been converted back into a dislike and a mistrust, and that the situation that took place in early October built more mistrust. That if I look at anything positive out of that, is that mistrust and that disaster that took place on October 7th brought in and the ugly face of both groups for all of us to see. And now it's time to stop being ugly with one another. It's time to try to move into the next phase. That's the teachings of Jesus. Again, it's individual. And yes, but the individuals become the governors. The individuals hopefully don't become the soldiers, but sometimes because you're in a system that brings you in, mandatory enlistment, and sometimes it's the pressure of families and so forth, and that pulls people in, and sometimes misguided religion, and they get the message in the mosque and in the synagogue, and sometimes some groups even today get it in the church. So religion needs to go back to what I'm talking about. They need to shed that tradition. They need to shed the laws of man and the commandments of man and go back to this loving presence that gives us this beautiful earth to share together and make it great for each one of us to exist in. And instead, we go fight about a specific piece and kill each other over it. It's maddening. I think it's time to love and forgive and work together towards a brighter future. We owe that to the children. We can't fix what happened to Grandpa, But we owe this to the next generation. And what I'm seeing on both sides with the children and what takes place there, it's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And I can't judge it. All I can do is just pray for their hearts to open up and love them and send them as much love, because they will not be fixed. And I'm talking about the soldiers. I'm talking about the people who are fighting. I'm talking about the people who are being dismembered and in pain. I want them to become whole again. And if I could do anything, I would just go give everybody a hug, because they're broken and they'll be broken for a long time. We just need to help them fix that. Okay, so now today's questions because the Saturday ones that came in Dr. Erico's session, he might be able to cover it in either next week or next March when he talks about it. So the Bible quote, Matthew 6:14, sound very conditional. Okay, so 6:14. I have to go see what that is. For if you forgive men their faults, your Father in heaven will also forgive you. Okay. This is right after the Lord's Prayer. So, is that what it really means? If you forgive, then you get forgiven. So forgiveness, and I don't think I have any of these recorded, but I've done full, like 1 hour, sometimes like 4-hour sessions on the concept of forgiveness with some very small groups. The word to forgive in Aramaic is shwak. And to shwak something is to release it, to untie it. It's like a knot. And when you undo a knot, is you shwak it. Okay, so to untie in any situation that needs forgiveness is something that holds you in place. So by what Jesus is teaching here, and it's a it's one of the pillars of his ministry, this concept of forgiveness. Because what he's saying is, if you don't let go, if you do not, untie all the knots that hold you back, God can't really get through to you, because what's holding you back is keeping you from God. So it's not a condition that God doesn't love you. God always loves you. According to Jesus, God's rain falls on the good and the wicked. The sun shines on the good and the wicked. So it's always telling us God's goodness is always available for you. But he's saying here is, if you hold on to the things that are holding you back, blah hurt me, dad abused me, teacher said this, somebody called my skin color so-and-so, and hold on to those things, you are going to have a very hard time getting that God love to rule your life. That's all he was meaning. He wasn't meaning that God would hold back, is that you would not be able to grasp the love of God the way you could if you don't clean your slate. That's all it is. Okay, this is a long one, so I'm going to try to get to okay. Okay. I was thinking how committed people in organized religion are to key beliefs, such as we are all sinners, Jesus forgives all our sins, or he is the only Son of God. How have you, Dr. Erico, and probably Dr. Lamza, found the stamina and comfort to present a message that is opposed to these widely accepted beliefs? That the person continues on. I imagine that this might upset many people. It reminds me of how Jesus upset the people in his own town, in his own day, by delivering a different message. Being a pioneer of new knowledge must be challenging. Thank you for the question and the opportunity to share. It is um, it's hard. And if you saw, if you noticed when I answered the question about Palestine and Israel, it is hard to stay true because it's so the traditional things are much more accepted. So you're spot on. Now, where does this stamina come from? Is, as I said, when you tap into this and you experience the joy of not having the burdens and the loyalties, when they lose they don't control me anymore. I can speak about myself, and I know Dr. Errico has a lot of the same feelings. So we do feel despair sometimes when I'm watching the bombs drop, when I'm watching the shootings, the killing, the kidnapping. So whatever. Today we had most of the audience here is from the U.S. Today we had a shooting in a celebration in Kansas City. Okay, again, I don't know why it happened. I don't know who, but I know that a person got killed and a few others are in critical condition, and a few others got hurt. We do this to each other. We make guns. We think that guns will save us. In case of a bad government, how much worse can our governments get? And governments, I'm not just picking on the US. Okay, we need to change that. We need to change our approach to things. And if I don't do that, then who will? And if you don't come and listen to me and hopefully believe that what we're saying is the truth, go and live it. Because now if 50 of us are out there doing this, it's much easier than me by myself or with just Dr. Errico. And that's the early Christian movement is we continue to love one another. I gave you a mission, all of you who attended today or whoever listens to this on YouTube. Go and love everybody for the next week. Everybody you interact with, no matter what the interaction is about, walk in thinking, I love this person, I love this situation, I'm going to bring nothing but love energy into it. And watch how happier you will be at the end of that week. Stamina is a different story because we tend to lose that. It's like just like wanting to exercise and lose weight, and come into February, March, it becomes harder, and you go back. It's easier to make the meals you used to make. It's easier to get into your pantry, go to the restaurant. So we have a tendency to lose that stamina. I think once you're hooked on it, and you have to continue to work on it. And when you slip, it's easy. God forgives you. Turn to God. Come back. So don't beat yourself up and keep creating more distance. Just come back to it. I think that's the trick to the stamina. Is when I stumble, I pick myself up quickly and bring myself back into the teachings. Thanks for the question. Off topic. Are the Dead Sea Scrolls written in Aramaic? They're written and I can read them, but they're written in the square letters, if I recall correctly, because I've seen them. So at the time of Jesus, there was Western Aramaic and Eastern Aramaic. Western Aramaic is what we think of it as Hebrew, the square letters. And that's why Jesus he spoke the Galilean in Jerusalem. They spoke the different dialect and used the different letters. And that's why he probably ran into some trouble going into some of the theological discussions and explaining himself as the Son of God, and we're all sons of God. And they said, oh, you're blaspheming. And so I think some of the trouble he got into was because of that. But I mean, Aramaic and Hebrew are more sister languages. And at the time of Jesus, that old ancient Hebrew had been basically annihilated, totally forgotten. And so you can say yes and no. Hebrew or Hebrew Aramaic would be the probably perfect answer. And we are on time. So, okay, I'll leave these till next time I speak. I have quite a few of them. So with that, I thank you. Don't forget to join Dr. Errico next week, or maybe me. And appreciate your support, appreciate your time. Happy Valentine's again. And till next time.